Welcome to another episode of Our Simsbury. For those of you who are not yet avid fans, this show focuses on members of the Simsbury community and surrounding areas. Today I'm here to introduce you to some actively involved citizens, Mary Margaret Girgenti and Richard Hogan, both members of the Board of Education here in Simsbury. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How are, Mary Margaret, let's start a little bit with you. Who are you and where are you from?
Well, let's see. I've been a member of the Board of Education for the past 15 years. I started when my youngest child entered school, and I had children at all three levels of the school system. So it seemed to make sense to get engaged with the board. Prior to that, I'd been involved with the PTOs and observing board meetings. Professionally, I work as a geriatric social worker for the past 2 decades, but I've also worked as a social worker in school systems and in child daycare settings.
What are your present goals with the board?
Well, the goal, every year the Board of Education establishes the goals that they're looking at for the year. And this year, we always do something that is a curriculum kind of evaluation. So we're looking at our mathematics curriculum. We've also, will be continuing to look at our health curriculum. Obviously, this year is a major year in terms of budget, and we have to continue to monitor the high school construction project. In addition, there is a group of people meeting at the high school, kind of looking at issues and concerns that may be present and trying to assure that we have continuous self-improvement by self-evaluating and making sure that the high school is working to its maximum possible degree.
All right, Mr. Hogan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and the difference in your role from Mary Margaret's?
Okay, I've been living in Simsbury for about 10 years, and my wife and I moved to the town because of the really good school system. I had 2 kids in the school system, and there was an opening on the Board of Education, so I kind of threw my hat into the ring and said that's something I wanted to do. And I've been on the board for about 7 years now. I am the vice chairperson of the board, and it's a title really. My only job as a vice chairperson is to service the chairperson when the chairwoman is not available. And I think it's probably happened once or twice in the last 3 years, so it very rarely happens. Professionally, I'm an attorney. I work for an insurance company in Rocky Hill, and I have 2 children, 7 and 10.
Great. Okay. How many faculty members are there in the school system? Either of you can jump in.
Oh.
You know, I don't. The school system obviously is a major employer, but we have a variety of roles, both the professionals, large number of paraprofessionals, and support people of psychologists, etc. I think in total we probably have something around 500 to 600 total employees, but that goes over a range of areas.
How many students attend the 5 elementary schools, Henry James, and the high school?
About approximately 5,000 students. I think that the actual number is 5,023, but it includes the elementary schools and includes Henry James, the high school, and there's also a preschool program that we run too. So I think the number is around 5,000. I think 5,023 if you add in the preschoolers.
So is there a standard ratio of teacher to student in classes that the board throws out for prospective people who want to move to the town, or?
The Board of Education has adopted a policy on ratios between teachers and students, and it differs. On the kindergarten level, I think it's around 20, and as we go to the upper grades, 2nd through 6th, I believe it's 25, 26, something around there.
You know, one of the interesting things I think with the school system is that is the way we have the policy established. But with special education needs and with students who have special needs, there often is more than one person in a classroom because many of the kids with some special needs are mainstreamed and they will have a paraprofessional in the room. So we try to assure that, you know, it's not only the number, but the constellation of students, that the needs of all people are being met by having an adequate number of adults in the class.
What is the anticipated future enrollment?
Well, yeah,
broad,
you know, I mean that's kind of interesting because 1995 to 1999 we had some projections of what we anticipated, and based on that we did a lot of adaptations to the schools. As you know, you told me that you had gone to Latimer. Latimer, Central, Teuton, Henry James, all were expanded based on what we anticipated for enrollment. We were looking at the high school at some point having somewhere around 1,850 students. So what we tried to do was accommodate the needs at the earlier levels and kind of move up. As you probably know, last year we did pass a high school renovation and construction project. And what that is designed to do is to accommodate that 1,850 proposed student body, but we're only right now putting classrooms in that will accommodate 1,700 students. So we're looking at giving ourselves the opportunity to grow as necessary. 1,850 seems a realistic kind of number. One of the things that when we made our decisions about the size, was we were aware of the fact that Meadowwood was a possibility, an additional development, but we did not factor in numbers specifically for that project. So it could go beyond that number.
Okay, so while we're on the high school construction project, how much was this influenced on basing crowding versus like new facilities?
I would say the major driver was the fact that it was going to be overcrowded, that the way we use the high school has changed over the last 20 or 30 years. It was crowded a few years ago, and it's just going to get worse. But I think also at the same time, we're very self-evaluative about our education program. And one of the things we found from college students who we would interview is that they felt that they weren't really prepared to take college-level science courses. And that's because of the science labs were just kind of out of date. So I think overcrowding was the most important thing, but also programmatic changes, trying to take advantage of technology and more integrate that into the school.
Some citizens have suggested the fiscal constraints that prevent the Board of Education from constructing a new high school will come back to haunt Simsbury in the future. Is this a possibility or a probability, do you think?
I'd say it's a possibility.
Okay.
I really don't.
Yeah, you know, it is a possibility. One of the things that is so special, I think, about this system is the fact that we do have, in our high school, it's a comprehensive high school. So, you know, you always read about how the excellence of our students in terms of the, you know, their SATs, the Merit Scholars, the CMTs, all of those kinds of things. But really the excellence is just that there is an opportunity for kids at all levels, regardless of their abilities, to excel, whether it's in the area of technology education, whether it's the culinary program, the arts and music programs, as well as the traditional academic areas. And I guess that's something we feel so strongly about that we want to see continue, that everyone would have an opportunity to feel success during the course of a day in the school as it is right now. And that would be the kind of thing that we would like to maintain, is options for all students.
Well, while we're on the subject of Simsbury school system, it's often boasted to be one of the best in the state. How accurate do you think this is, and where does this, where are the praises based upon? Is it only on test scores, or is it a multitude of things?
You see it typically in the newspaper when the different test scores come out, the mastery tests or some of the other tests that are given in elementary level. And we typically are one of the, either the best or the first or second best in the state. So I think that's where a lot of it comes from. But having been involved with the school system, I think it is the #1 public school system in the state, not just because for those reasons. It has an incredible athletic program. The percentage of students participating in athletics is really, can't really compare it with anything else in the state. It's got an excellent special education program. It seems across the spectrum of programs that are offered, they're offered at a very good level. We have excellent staff, and we have excellent students and families who really push their children to achieve everything that they can. So I think it is the best school system.
And you know, it's interesting that a couple of years ago, the Wall Street Journal magazine identified it as one of the top 100 in the country, and one of only 2 in Connecticut who were recognized in that 100 listing. And part of that was just because it's not only how much money people spend on education, it's how the dollars are expended. And we are 110 in spending out of 169 towns, and yet our outcomes are at that very high level. And it's been a consistent high performance over time. It's not like a one-year event. So it's that consistency over time and a judicious use of resources, I think, that are also part of the mix in the excellence that's seen.
What else would you say contributes to success? Like, for instance, the fact that Simsbury is one of the also wealthier towns in Connecticut. Do you think that has a large to do with the success?
I think it does. I think from the studies I've read, the school districts that seem to do the best are ones where the parents are wealthy and the parents have a high degree of educational attainment. A lot of them have gone to college. But we compare ourselves with communities that are far wealthier than ours. We're certainly a relatively affluent community, but I don't even think we're in the top 20 of towns in the state. And we still do better than those towns. So it's not just the income, it's not just the educational level that the parents have achieved. It's something more than that.
And I think one of the things that it is that well-developed curriculum that is articulated, from K through 12. And it really, I mean, that concept of excellence really starts early on. We have a tremendous group of dedicated staff who are outstanding in their field and who could be many other places and who choose to be here. And they consistently show us excellence, and they're consistently creative, and the support of family system. I mean, I think it's fair to say that many people, just as Rich said, moved here for purposes of education. They valued it. So whether or not their income is as high, that value on education is there. Whether, and there is, a certain amount of diversity that is in there, but there's still that value on education.
Right. For some of our viewers who may not be familiar with the Simsbury school system, what is the size of the system and how is it divided?
Well, as Rich said, it's about 5,000 plus students. We have approximately 1,500 at the high school level, about 800 at Henry James, which is the middle school, and a 7-8 middle school. And then we have the 5 elementary schools, which have roughly 2,300 students among them. And then because of the requirements of special education, which are that we are responsible for children from 3 up until age 21, we have an additional about 112 kids in the preschool level who are involved in preschool programs. So that's what it looks like.
Okay. Some citizens have also suggested that the Colborough tobacco property will eventually be developed through legal action, despite the many justifiable efforts to prevent its development because of the Love Canal probability in that location. How will this impact the Board of Education?
Well, it'll have a dramatic impact if that land is developed like Colborough wants to develop the land. And I forget how many units did they were talking about.
I think it was about 320 in the initial grouping. Yeah.
We would be in a situation where we would probably have to build another elementary school if that were to go forward. If a development that was less than that was actually approved, it would still have a pretty dramatic impact. Our budgets are really driven by the increase in the number of students we get, and if that were to be developed like they want it to be developed, it would be very bad.
I've heard some students complain, or citizens complain, that Connecticut has been unfair with the allotment of money given to Simsbury for the school system. Do you think there's a reasonable complaint, or what otherwise?
Well, I think at this point we're probably well served by the fact that we haven't had a lot of money from the state.
Why is that?
Well, because there is a reduction in all of the state funding, so we have not been very dependent on it. I think it's roughly 5% or 5.7%, something like that, that comes to Simsbury from the state. I would agree that we are not reimbursed adequately, and I think particularly in areas of special education where the expenses can be very high for even one student, and that the rate of reimbursement is certainly not adequate. But at this point, when everyone is struggling with their budget, it almost seems that when you don't get much, there isn't a lot that can be taken away. So.
We lost a lot of state dollars in the early 90s, and when the last time there was a budget problem on the state level, and I'm just worried that we're going to be hurt pretty badly this time. But
at one point we received 25 cents on every dollar from the state versus what we're talking about now, which is about 5 cents. So
wow.
It's a big difference. Yeah.
Why was the change? Why did they sorry. Why did it occur?
In the early 90s, there were tremendous budget problems, and there was huge budget shortfalls. And at that point, the state enacted an income tax, which Connecticut had never had before. And as part of that balancing of the budget, they cut expenditures dramatically and raised taxes dramatically. And I think on the state level, education spending is just about half of their budget. So.
But does Simsbury receive less money than, say, other towns, Farmington, Avon?
The state aid is given to us in a formula that looks at a number of different things, including town wealth, town educational attainment, the percentage of residents on any type of welfare program. It's a very complicated formula. Avon, for instance, I don't think gets any money from the state for educational purposes, or $50,000, something very little, because they're a somewhat wealthier community than Simsbury, but that's the major reason.
Do you think this system should be more financially rewarded for its successes rather than deprive the extra funding?
It's kind of a difficult question to answer when you look at, what are the resources that your community has, and you look at some of the needs statewide. The federal government has indicated that they were going to participate a lot more in education, but those dollars aren't there either. So that, obviously we would wish to have more resources because our tax base has not expanded substantially, and it is very difficult on the residents to support the system. So we're always aware of the constraints that are there. But, when you look at needs throughout the whole state, it's really hard to come up with the formula that is going to be appropriate, and we would love to see ourselves rewarded because obviously certainly it would put us in a lot better shape. But the system isn't based on that. It's based more on needs and rather than on our abilities, I guess, as a system, our outcomes.
What would you say are some of the most popular complaints that you hear from the town that really shouldn't be made because people don't really understand the whole process of the board?
I think everybody's entitled to their complaints. They're taxpayers, and as elected officials, we have a duty to really listen to them. I think the most frustrating thing is you get complaints on both sides. The bottom line is, I think, especially in the Board of Ed, you really are not going to be able to please everybody. Some people feel that educational spending should be increased dramatically, and some people feel that it should be cut dramatically. And during budget time, you'll get, tens and dozens of contact calls and letters on both sides of the issue, and there's really no way to please both sides. But I think everybody's entitled to make their complaints.
I think one of the issues for us is the ability to communicate with people who don't currently have students in the school system, and to make them aware. Then they have, obviously they may not agree with what we're doing, but to just get them adequate information. And that's the difficulty when you're not directly involved in something, to get information that's accurate, that's timely, and that allows you to make an informed decision. I think programs such as this, and the fact that many of the board meetings and the budget meetings that Rich will be chairing are televised provides people with an opportunity to be aware of that. And we're really grateful for those opportunities. But communication is difficult.
Now, you say you're going to be chair of the budget meetings. How is the budget for the school system as of right now?
You mean the process that we go through? Where are we at right now?
Right, yeah.
We're really at the early stages. What happens is the Board of Finance typically gives us a guideline or a cap. This year they've told the Board of Selectmen's office and the Board of Education that they are not going to, they are wanting every one of us to come in with a budget that's no more than 4.25% more than last year. So we've gotten that message from the Board of Finance. The budget subcommittee will start meeting next week to review the superintendent's draft of a budget. We've asked the superintendent to come in with a budget that meets that cap of 4.25%. So we're really early on in the process. I think the full board will adopt a budget in February. Yeah. And then we typically will go to a vote by the voters in May. So we're early on in the process.
But it's very difficult because very often even one new special education student can tremendously impact what our budget is going to look like. And so, you know, I think the planning is done very well, and the part that we have control over, we're really able to work with pretty thoroughly. But it's some of those other pieces over which we don't have control that could have a substantial impact on the final outcome. But we recognize it has to be 4 1/4, and that's it. Yeah.
How much of a voice do citizens have in terms of the Board of Education?
I think citizens have a tremendous voice. We have public audiences at our meetings. As Rich has alluded to, there are phone calls, there are letters, there are opportunities for people to come to public hearings, hearings of the Board of Finance, the hearings at the town meeting, the ability to participate in a vote that approves or does not approve the budget. But the discussion, I think, at the town meetings is often really helpful for people in terms of clarifying some of the concerns that they have, getting a better understanding. But I really feel in this community there is a tremendous opportunity for people to impact and to understand what happens. We have to take responsibility in the end for assuring that we do our job, which is providing for the optimal education of the students of Simsbury. We also have to be cognizant of the fiscal constraints. So it is a balancing act, and we try very hard to hear people and to respond. But I really do believe citizens have an opportunity to impact it.
Do you feel that citizens really take advantage of that opportunity, or do you find it comes and goes in terms of active interest?
I'd say it ebbs and flows. People are busy with so many things. They have their own careers, they have their families, they they have a lot of things pulling them, and typically they don't get involved unless something really is upsetting to them. So it seems to rise and fall. I think people are definitely committed to the education system here. I think it's the one thing, when I meet different people in town, it's the one thing we all have in common. And it can be seniors or people that just moved here out of college. We all came here for the great school system. That's one thing we all should care about. And as long as people perceive things are going okay, they're not likely to get involved. But once they see that there potentially is a problem, we've had some meetings where we've had 300 people, 400 people show up. We had, how many people signed a petition last year? 1,000, 2,000. So people, they have a lot of things pulling them in every different direction.
And that's a real difficulty, that whole concept of citizen participation and getting adequate information, the communication piece. It's really difficult if you just read the newspapers. That's not going to provide you with what's happening on the local level. And that's why I said earlier that communication piece is so very difficult, because unless you're very involved, and it's really hard. And we know citizen participation in general has ebbed tremendously. So it's a difficulty.
Were citizens involved with the decision about the high school?
Absolutely. When we did our first project on the first proposal on the high school, when we were looking for construction, I think we had more than 200, 300 people who came out to meetings to hear information, to ask questions, to be involved in an early phase, and to try and make some informed judgments. We tried to bring that information to all of the elementary schools, to have it available to people at the senior center, to do meetings at various times of day with the civic clubs, organizations, all of those kinds of things. And people really did, I think, get a true flavor for it. Obviously, there was a concern about what is the ability to pay and what is the reality based on the kind of tax base we have. But I think there was good information, and I think people really jumped in to understand, because this is really the biggest project that this town has seen in many years, and cost-wise probably the biggest amount of most dollars that's been expended.
Right. Have the plans for the high school been finalized? Is it going to be an addition or a brand new high school itself?
The high school project involves about a 50% increase in the square footage of the high school, and renovations throughout the high school, some very extensive, some very minor. The plans have all been drawn up. I think next Tuesday, which will be the 15th, I believe, the 15th, the school system will bring the plans to the State Department of Education, and they go through a process of about 4 to 6 hours where they review every bit of the plan to make sure that it complies with state statutes. And I think they have a 30-day time period to review the plans and then either approve them or disapprove them. I don't know how much time you have. We may not have, the state may not have the resources to do that within 30 days, and there may be some requirement that review is done on the local level. But that's where we're going. The plan is to bid it in February or March, sign a contract into March, and start construction on the new portion of the high school as soon as school is out, so the end of June.
But, you know, there are a lot of people who are involved in this. You've got the Public Building Committee of the town that's involved, design review, we have land use commissions, we have a whole variety of people. So again, that's another way of getting that public participation in, and people can attend any and all of those meetings, you know, to express their views. So we're very grateful for the support of having the renovation and construction done. But then there are all of these other opportunities for people to kind of, you know, fine-tune it so that the process is one that allows for public participation.
Are there any specifics, new technology and things like that will be going to the high school that you could tell people about?
The science classrooms are going to have some very modern, up-to-date science labs, which we're very excited about. Right. And so that's one big change. The art rooms right now are incredibly inadequate, and they're going to be much bigger, a lot of room for all the projects that the children are working on. I think those are the two biggest.
Right. You know, the opportunities to have light involved, and looking at the media center and making sure that that's up to date. You know, we're looking at just, particularly with the science classrooms, as Rich has said, they are so inadequate in terms of the way in which learning occurs these days, that this would be very exciting. And quite frankly, when there is competition for resources for teachers, etc., it's really, we're interested in ensuring that we have facilities that are competitive for people who are going to want to work here over time. So the whole concept is very, very exciting. There will be a career resource center. There will be things that will help people explore what options are available, whatever their interest areas are.
Will there be new computer labs?
Yes.
I'm not sure exactly how the computer pieces are going. Right now we have a piecemeal. We have computers every place under the sun. They will be redone, but yeah.
I know some high schools have TV studios where they have announcements on the TVs in the mornings and things. Are there any plans for anything like that?
My recollection was that we had to cut that.
That out. That's what I recall as well.
Yeah, you know, we've been going through this a long time.
Right.
My recollection is that we had it as part of the plan, and we ultimately had to take that out.
There are a lot of things that we had to remove. But you know, it really is important to at least get basic, adequate classrooms, and that's kind of what we ended up focusing on. We're hoping that we would have the opportunity, if it's necessary, to be able to add in some of those things. But at the moment, there are cost constraints. We're very aware of them. There are limits that over the next 6 years, according to the Board of Finance, in terms of the amount of capital improvements that we can do, and we're trying to be very conscientious about assuring that everything is done within those cost caps.
That's okay, because we have this great studio right down the street from the high school.
That's exactly right.
You can just come on over here.
And we're delighted to have it.
Definitely. Are there any last words you guys want to add in about the board, plans, some hopes to have more people involved, anything like that?
Well, I would just say I've really enjoyed my tenure on the board. I have got to work with a number of really great people, and been involved in a school system that, you know, it's just a pleasure for me to be involved in. You know, it was a great school system long before I came, and hopefully when I'm done on the Board of Ed, it'll still be a great school system. So it's been fun working with the people and being involved in the process.
Yeah,
I would have to agree with that. It's been very exciting because there are so many staff members at whatever level who are so excellent and so committed to this system. To work with excellence in that way is just marvelous, and the commitment and support of the people in our staff, as well as a community that supports education, makes our job a very positive one.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this episode.
Thank you for having us, Elin.
Thank you for joining us in this episode of Our Simsbury. Please come and watch us again. It's a great program. Thank you. Bye.